I thought I was smart. At 21 years old, I had just arrived at Princeton with a perfect score on my physics entrance exam. As far as I knew, no one had ever done that before. People back at MIT told me I was special, a genius even. I believed them. Then I found out who was coming to my first seminar. John von Neumann, the man many people called the smartest human being who ever lived, and he was going to sit there and watch me present my work. What happened that day taught me something about intelligence I never forgot. It started when my advisor, John Wheeler, came to me with an idea. He said, "Feynman, you're a young fellow. You need experience giving talks. Why don't you present our work at the department seminar?" I said, "Sure." I imagined a few professors, maybe some graduate students, nothing I couldn't handle. Then Professor Wigner pulled me aside in the hallway. He said, "Feynman, I think your work is very interesting, so I have invited Professor Russell to the seminar, Henry Norris Russell, the famous astronomer." I felt my confidence slip a little. Wigner continued, "I think Professor von Neumann would also be interested." My stomach dropped. "And Professor Pauli is visiting from Switzerland. I have invited him as well. Wolfgang Pauli, the most brutal critic in physics. Your theory had even a tiny flaw. Pauli would find it and destroy you in front of everyone." I must have turned pale. Wigner smiled and said, "Do not worry. They are very nice. They do not bite." I was not so sure about that. You have to understand who John von Neumann was, because this wasn't just some smart professor. When he was 6 years old, he could divide 8-digit numbers in his head. Not on paper, in his head. He could also joke in classical Greek with his father's dinner guests. By 8, he had mastered calculus. By 12, he had read a 46-volume world history series and remembered all of it. His math tutor came to his house for their first lesson when Johnny was 15. After that session, the tutor went home and cried, not because it went badly, but because he had never seen anything like that boy's mind. There's a famous story about him. Someone asked von Neumann a puzzle at a party. Two bicyclists start riding toward each other. A fly goes back and forth between them. How far does the fly travel before the bicyclists collide? There's a simple trick to solve it. You calculate how long it takes for the bicycles to meet and multiply by the fly's speed. Von Neumann gave the answer instantly. The person said, "Oh, you saw the trick." Von Neumann looked confused. "What trick?" he said. "I just summed the infinite series." He had calculated an infinite series in his head in seconds. This was the man coming to watch me present. The day arrived. I got there early and filled the chalkboard with equations. I wanted everything perfect. Then Einstein walked in. He said, "Hello, I'm coming to your seminar." Just like that, casual, like he was anybody. I nearly dropped the chalk. Einstein sat down, then Pauli, then Wigner, then von Neumann. I looked at them. Nobel laureates, the founders of quantum mechanics, the people who had literally rewritten the laws of physics, and me, a kid from Queens who still talked like a bum. My friends used to joke about my accent. I pulled out my notes. My hand was shaking so badly the paper was vibrating. I thought, forget it, just do the physics. Stop thinking about who is watching. Just explain what you know. So I did. I talked about our theory, how Wheeler and I had found a new way to describe electron interactions. The math was complicated, but I knew it cold. When I finished, Pauli stood up immediately. He said, "I do not think this theory can be right because of this and this and this." He listed his objections, then turned to Einstein and said, "Don't you agree, Professor Einstein?" Einstein said one word, "No." A long German-sounding no. Polite, but very clear. He said he found the ideas interesting. He was tolerant of new approaches, even ones that challenged his own work. Years later, I discovered Pauli was actually right. Our theory did have problems, but that day I survived. After the seminar, von Neumann came up to me. I expected criticism, technical questions. He was the greatest mathematician alive. Instead, he smiled and said 2 words. Interesting work. That's when something shifted in my head. I had been terrified of these people. I thought they were different from me, superior, beyond human. But von Neumann was just a person. Incredibly smart, yes, but curious, open to new ideas. Willing to listen to a 21-year-old nobody. I stopped being afraid of genius. That day I started seeing brilliant people as colleagues, not gods. A few years later I saw von Neumann again, this time at Los Alamos in the New Mexico desert. We were both working on the Manhattan Project, trying to build the atomic bomb before the Nazis did. On Sundays, a group of us would walk in the canyons. Me, von Neumann, Hans Bethe, Bob Bacher. We would hike through the desert and talk about physics, mathematics, life. Von Neumann always wore a three-piece suit, even hiking over rocks in the canyon. He looked like he was going to a board meeting. I was in a t-shirt. I thought it was hilarious. During one of those walks, von Neumann gave me advice that changed my life. We were talking about the bomb, about what it meant, about our responsibility for creating something that could kill millions. We were worried. All of us were. And von Neumann said something I never forgot. He said, "You don't have to be responsible for the world that you're in." I thought about that for years. Everywhere you go, people tell you what you should worry about, what you should fix, what you should feel guilty about. The weight of the world is supposed to be on your shoulders. Von Neumann was saying something different. You were born into this world. You didn't make it. You can contribute, but you don't have to carry everything. I developed what I called my sense of social irresponsibility from that advice. Not cruelty, not ignoring suffering, just understanding that you can't solve every problem. You have to choose where to put your energy. It made me a very happy man. Working with von Neumann also taught me something about different kinds of genius. Some people are brilliant because they have enormous raw power. They calculate faster, remember more, see patterns instantly. Von Neumann was like that, a human computer before computers existed. But there is another kind of brilliance, the kind that sees things differently, that asks questions nobody else thinks to ask. I was not as fast as von Neumann, nobody was, but sometimes I could see around corners that he walked straight past. And here's what mattered. We respected each other. He did not look down on me for being slower. I did not resent him for being faster. We were just two people trying to understand the universe. Von Neumann died in 1957, cancer. He was only 53. That was 8 years before I won the Nobel Prize for work that grew from what Wheeler and I had started. The theory I presented that day when my hands were shaking. The last months of his life were hard. The cancer spread to his brain. Von Neumann, who could sum infinite series in seconds, could no longer remember basic mathematics. The universe does not care how smart you are. Here's what I learned from John von Neumann. Do not be afraid of brilliant people. They are just people. Talk to them. Learn from them. Let them challenge you. And remember this. The point of life is not to be the smartest person in the room. It is to understand things, to figure out how nature works, to do your part with the time you have. Von Neumann was the smartest man I ever met. What did he do with that incredible brain? The same thing I did. The same thing you can do. He tried to understand the world. I was 21, hands shaking, presenting to the smartest human being who ever lived. Years later, we walked together in the canyons, two friends talking about physics and life, and he taught me the most important lesson of all. You do not have to be responsible for the world that you are in. Just do your part as well as you can. That is enough. That lesson stayed with me long after those canyon walks ended. Long after Los Alamos emptied out and the desert went quiet again. I carried it back with me into classrooms, into laboratories, into every argument, every mistake, every moment of doubt. It changed how I listened to people. It changed how I spoke. And most of all, it changed how I judged myself. Before that, I thought intelligence meant speed. Whoever could calculate faster, remember more, dominate a discussion, must be superior. I measured myself constantly against others. Every conversation felt like a test. Every mistake felt like exposure. Standing in front of those giants at Princeton, I believed one wrong step would prove I didn't belong. That belief is poison. It turns learning into fear and curiosity into performance. What I slowly realized is that real understanding does not move at one fixed speed. Nature does not reward haste. It rewards honesty. If you are confused, you must stay confused long enough to find the right question. Many brilliant people never do that. They rush to answers because they are capable of rushing. That is a kind of blindness disguised as strength. I learned to enjoy not knowing, to sit with a problem without immediately attacking it, to play with it, to turn it around, to ask stupid questions out loud. People worry far too much about looking intelligent. The truth is, the fastest way to stop thinking is to start protecting your reputation. Once you care more about how you sound than whether you are right, you are finished. Von Neumann never did that. For all his speed, he listened carefully. When he didn't understand something, he said so. When something interested him, he followed it, even if it came from someone younger, slower, less polished. That humility is rare, and it is not a consequence of intelligence. It is a choice. So learn something else from watching great minds work together. Disagreement is not hostility. Pauli attacked ideas mercilessly, but he was not attacking people. Most people never learn to separate the two. They hear criticism and feel threatened. Their ego rushes in to defend territory. Science doesn't work that way. Progress comes from collision. Ideas must smash into each other hard enough for the weak ones to break. That day in the seminar, Pauli was right and Einstein was wrong. Or maybe both were partly right. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the conversation continued. Nobody stormed out. Nobody took it personally. The work survived because it was bigger than any one person. Later in life, when students came to me terrified of asking questions, I recognized the look immediately. I had worn it myself. They thought everyone else understood everything. They thought confusion was failure. I told them the truth. Confusion is the engine. If you are not confused, you are not learning anything new. I told them another thing too. Genius is not something you owe the world. If you have talent, it is not a moral obligation. You are allowed to enjoy your work. You are allowed to play. You are allowed to fail privately, repeatedly, without apologue. Why? The world will try to load you with responsibility, guilt, expectation. Most of it is noise. That idea made people uncomfortable. It still does. They hear irresponsibility and think it means indifference. It doesn't. It means freedom. You cannot think clearly if you are constantly trying to justify your existence. Creativity requires lightness. Curiosity needs space. The mind shuts down under moral pressure. Von Neumann understood that even while working on something as heavy as the bomb. He saw the paradox clearly. You can take your work seriously without turning yourself into a martyr. You can contribute without believing you control the outcome. The universe is larger than your intentions. As I got older, I watched many brilliant people burn out. Some were faster than me. Some were smarter by every measurable standard. But they were crushed by comparison, by fear of falling behind, by the need to always be exceptional. Intelligence, when tied to identity, becomes fragile. One failure and the whole structure collapses. I was lucky. That early terror at Princeton, followed by von Neumann's quiet kindness, knocked something loose in me. I stopped chasing the idea of being the smartest. I started chasing the joy of figuring things out. That joy lasts longer. It survives mistakes. It survives aging. Even when memory fades, curiosity can remain. Near the end of his life, when von Neumann could no longer do the mathematics that once flowed effortlessly, people felt a deep tragedy, and it was tragic. But watching that happen taught me something important. Intelligence is temporary. Insight is temporary. Even memory is temporary. What remains is how you engaged with the LD while you could. Von Neumann engaged fully. He played. He argued. He listened. He laughed. He wore a three-piece suit in the desert and didn't care how ridiculous it looked. He did not try to be a symbol. He was just a man using his mind as best he could for as long as he could. That is all any of us can do. When people ask me what the most important lesson of my life was, they expect something technical, some equation, some discovery. I tell them it was standing at a chalkboard at 21, shaking with fear, and learning that the people I idolized were human, curious, fallible, kind, sometimes wrong. That realization is liberating. Once you stop worshiping intelligence, you can start using your own. Once you stop fearing judgment, you can think honestly. Once you stop trying to carry the world, you can finally move. You do not need permission to explore. You do not need to be extraordinary to ask deep questions. You do not need to be responsible for everything that is broken. You only need to be honest with what interests you and persistent enough to follow it. That is what science is. That is what life is. I was 21 when my hands shook in front of the greatest minds alive. I was older when I walked through the desert with one of them as a friend. Between those two moments is a lifetime of work, mistakes, curiosity, and joy. And it all rests on one simple truth I learned early. Do not be afraid of brilliance. Do not be afraid of being slower. Do not be afraid of not knowing. Just try to understand something, anything, as clearly as you can, for as long as you can. That is enough.